ongoing growth process. And I'm excited to be here. And I appreciate your time, Hannah, and what you do. And thank you also, Brandon, to keep the torch going wherever you go, because we really need to generate some wealth in our communities. So
yes, we do. We absolutely do. Thank you. Chloe brought up tracking. So that's what we're going to talk about next month, because these two, the system building and experimentation that we're talking about today, and then the tracking, like spending tracking, we'll talk about next month. These go very well. Go, Cheyenne.
I forgot to tell you that Erica texted me, and she's been dealing with power outages in her neighborhood, and her power just went off again.
Oh my gosh.
And so she's very frustrated, and she apologized to you and to everybody.
Okay.
Just wanted to let you know, and I had forgotten. And also, I'm going to turn off my camera for a few minutes while I eat some breakfast. But I'm here completely present. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Thank you. I hope Erica gets a nap. That's what you do when the lights go out, right? Make sure your phone's charged and you get to go take a nap. Don't open the refrigerator. All right. So, okay. Next month, we're talking about tracking. Let's just flip over to the slides, because otherwise I just talk. It's not the greatest. Here we go. So as I'm going to slides, you guys are all getting reduced to the size of postage stamps. So I may not see what you are saying or doing. So please, I'm definitely, we're going to get less and less good at checking chat. If you have something to share, just unmute yourselves and pipe up. So yes, we're talking about how to teach those you serve how to experiment on themselves. But let's talk first about what holistic financial wellness is. And it's different than traditional financial literacy in a couple important ways. Holistic financial wellness means that we respect that every part of your life touches your finances, and your finances touch every part of your life. That's what holistic means. And this, of course, isn't just you. It's the people you serve. It's everybody. Financial literacy is just not enough. We must grow resilience, trust in ourselves, and awareness of our decisions without shame. Holistic financial wellness must be trauma-informed, collaborative, and client-centered. That's why you notice, like, if you've been on any of these Train the Trainer classes, much of this is conversationally based. It's meant to be used during a conversation. It is not meant to be directive. Holistic financial wellness exists along this curriculum, this spectrum rather. On the left-hand side, we've got basic financial literacy. Like, this is the difference between a stock and a bond. It's how compound interest works. It's how to run your credit reports. It's what the heck is a 401k. All of these things are Googleable, right? For free. You can get all of this information right now. And all of this information, none of this has ever changed anyone's life. I could teach you the difference between a stock and a bond in 15 seconds. You'll absolutely understand it, because it's not rocket science. It will not change your life, right? On the other end of the spectrum is where we get the soft skills. This is problem solving, decision making, reducing procrastination. This is where awareness and resilience comes in. This is how we actually change our lives. So we have to have the full breadth of this spectrum of both the hard mechanical skills and the soft skills around decision making. Soft skills are how we get from where we are to where we actually want to be. And today we're talking about system building, which might sound mechanical, but it's actually deeply a soft skill, because we're talking about decision making and problem solving. We're not talking about budgeting today, but I'm frequently asked, where does budgeting lie along this spectrum? And budgeting is everywhere. You need the entire spectrum to be able to make and keep an adaptive, evolving budget. We are not talking about budgets today. That's why we'll never have just one class on budgeting, is because we need everything. We need every part of the spectrum. Financial wellness only requires two things. These are the only two things that my curriculum addresses, is to be able to observe your behavior without judgment, and the ability to trust yourselves. There is no difference between being able to trust yourself, or, like for the people that you serve, the ability for the people that you serve to trust themselves is the same as resilience. If you know that you have your own back, you can be resilient. So it sounds super simple. There's only two things that my curriculum addresses, but these are hard, right? Everybody can observe their own behavior with judgment. I don't ever need to teach anybody how to do that. The ability to observe our own behavior without judgment is an actual skill. And that's one of the things we're talking about today. So I swear, I don't do this to make anybody uncomfortable. It is the way that real people talk in the real world. So I did just want to, I've already sweared a couple times, I think. So just be warned. So the purpose of this class is to deeply understand why the conventional ways we try to support those we serve may be actually holding them back. My purpose is to teach you a conversational strategy. Strategy is even too firm of a word. I think maybe scaffold, to teach an adaptive system building system. I went round and round with this sentence. Like, how do you say a system that builds systems without saying a system building system? If you have notes for me later, please let me know. We're working on reducing the need for you to be an accountability partner, for you, less babysitting for you over time, which ultimately means that you're giving those that you serve ownership over their own process. So what are some conventional ways that we try to help others change? We act as an accountability partner, right? This leverages their need to comply with what we want, and or not be embarrassed, right? So I am not a huge fan of accountability. A championship is a more trauma-informed way to go about things. But I know that in your work and in my work too, I occasionally have people ask me to be their accountability partner. That's kind of a trap, right? Because that is, well, I'll talk about it in a second. Just read the slides, Hannah. Accountability means that like every plan of action that we set out should be completed as laid out. And if that's not done, if the person isn't able to keep with the path that we laid out and we set accountability around, the kind of underlying message here is that they did something wrong, and that may not actually be the case. Accountability reduces or removes the ability to pivot and adapt. So if we're sticking to that plan of action, which we'll talk deeply about in a moment, it reduces the ability to pivot. And I don't know how many times in your life have you pivoted? Since the minute you graduated high school, how many times have you needed to change your life and change your expectations? So adapting and pivoting is our normal state. Frustratingly, it is. Another conventional way that we try to help others change is we try to strategize on the wrong things. And if oh, someone unmuted. Do you have a comment?
I just wanted to chime in really quick about the
Yes,
pivoting.
yes,
That it's really important that you bring that up, because a lot of the times what happens is, this almost rigidity that we approach situations with, finances, mental health,
anything.
you name it. And the inability to pivot. I said this and I can only do this because I said this, as opposed to saying I said this, but my situation has changed, so I should have the flexibility to, pivot, adjust as necessary. So that's all.
Yes.
That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you. And we're going to talk, there's an actual bias in our brains that leads us to that. And the messaging that the world gives us in our hyper productivity obsessed world is that you set out a plan, you stick to it. That's the way it goes. Otherwise, you're not a good person or a good man or a good woman. Like that's not the way the world works. So we must be able to pivot, but we do not teach each other how to pivot until today. No, we're not going to fix everything today. Another way that we try to help others change that does not typically work is we strategize on the wrong things. We're breaking down the wrong part of the processes. And this is where I have a beef with SMART goals. I don't know. Sometimes I'll play the game, like I'll have people raise their hands if you've set more than 10 SMART goals in your life, and keep them up if you've kept even one, because they don't work. So SMART goals are I have beef with them. So we're strategizing on the wrong things. What the strategizing on the wrong things SMART goals does, and other strategies around breaking down a big goal into smaller goals, which sounds incredibly easy, but never quite works like it's supposed to. It's incredibly impersonal. We're not really bringing the person into it. we are not evaluating, we're not building that system around what their life can look like. We're just disconnecting that potential plan, project, goal. We're disconnecting it from the reality of their life. It is a setup for failure. Like we broke this one big goal into many, many tiny little goals, and I couldn't even complete this tiniest little goal. What the fuck is wrong with me? Told you. So I get enough failures like that under my belt, and I am highly unlikely to keep trying. I'm gonna slip into apathy. I'm like, who cares? Doesn't matter. And for my generation, whatever. So we've got some common barriers. These are not the only barriers to creating great systems in our lives, but these are the common ones. All right, so story time. All right, so you're an airline pilot. You are, when you set out, I don't know anything about airline pilots or flying, so forgive me. So you set out, oh, Cheyenne, you raised your hand?
I can wait until the story is over.
I haven't even started the story.
Oh,
What's
okay.
your...
No, I was just gonna talk a little bit about what you were saying. I reflect on that a little because I used to talk down to myself a lot because being disappointed because of the expectations I had on myself and the punishment I would put, all that. But I've had several months now practicing really just acknowledging when I do it and then try to flip it. And it's becoming a really, honestly, I didn't expect it, but it's becoming something that's reduced my anxiety a lot. So talking bad to myself and me feeling shameful about it. So I just wanted, like, I was reflecting while you were talking about it. So I want to share it.
Yeah. A lot of those conventional tools that we have at our disposal just build more shame. And it's something that I could talk about for 6 years well, that's why my sign says that, right? Shame does not help. It is an easily available tool that we have and we use, like, and we see it modeled for us, but it doesn't work, right? It's just the only tool that we've had. Robert shared over text. I think that was to everybody. Maybe better check that first. Yes. Robert shared that SMART goals are part of his job. And I would assume that you also, in some part of your job, have a form somewhere that looks like SMART goals, and it's part of your job to do that. And I get that. And I'm not saying stop doing that part of your job. I'm saying change your expectations of whether or not that works, right? You can do both. You can do that like formulaic expectation of setting out SMART goals and at the same time be building in this conversational kind of strategy alongside it to actually help the people that you serve. So let's talk about airline pilots. So you're flying an airplane. You're going to, before you even lift off, you're going to set out a plan. You're going to go from point A to point B. This is how you're going to do it, right? Bing, 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 bing. You have to, and you call that into somebody. I don't freaking know. So we'll just go with that. So let's say you're flying along and the weather turns to bullshit, but you set out a plan. So you're going to keep going on your plan. Oh, and now some sort of instrumentation isn't working, but you set a plan. So you're going to keep going on your plan. And now something or someone on board is out of order or sick or ill or injured or broken, right? But you set out a plan. You said you're going to do this. And by God, you stick to your word. You keep going. I just have to keep pushing through. And that's how airplanes get flown into the side of mountains. Pilots, I'm stealing this directly from some military strategy. Several of the things we're going to talk about today are around a kind of military mindset. Pilots actually have a name for this. They call it get their itis, right? The closer, I'll just go to the slide. What our brains naturally do this, it's called planned continuation bias. They actually have a name for it, and everybody's brain is already doing this. So this is not a personality defect. It is something that is sort of built into our brains. It's the tendency to continue on a plan regardless of changing situations. So a plan that we set out at one point was probably a fantastic plan. Situations change around us that make that once good plan into a crap plan, right? And we have this tendency, this natural born tendency, which is probably actually sometimes served us very, very well, is that we will stick to that plan. And it is more pronounced as we get closer to that goal. So The more pronounced if we are under stress, pressure, or crisis, right? If we feel like we have choices that have been removed from us, we will default to that plan, that single-minded, hyper-focus, tunnel vision. Get there, itis. I love that pilots call it that. So here's what it sounds like. I am listening for this when I'm working with my clients. It sounds like I just need to keep going, or I'm no quitter, right? It sounds like that. It is over and over and again, that pressure to get there, to do it, to finish it, no, regardless. And it is related to something called action bias, which is next. Action bias is the kind of the underlying, oh, this is not one that has the cool animation. Sorry, guys, just read it all at once, I guess. So action bias means that we will naturally favor action over inaction, doing something. Well, I got to do something, right? I don't know if you've ever heard anybody that you sort of, I got to do something, that sort of frantic action without a lot of thoughtfulness. Action bias and plan continuation bias is an attempt to motivate or propel us, and it can actually be useful, right? But it can also be a response to feeling out of control and feeling a reduction of choices. It is always reactive, action bias is. It results in impulsivity, hot states, crisis, panic. And oddly, because action bias can be a response to us feeling out of control or having a lack of choices, it actually reinforces that. And in these hot states where we are under the influence of action bias and or plan continuation bias, do we make really great choices or not so great choices, do you think?
I'm gonna say not so great.
Not so great.
for 300.
Ooh, that's a good idea for next month's class. Right?
Or
But
maybe
because these are
freezing too.
Yes, absolutely. Right. That's shutdown, which is a protective strategy. That is something that we will do as well. And then, of course, we've got the underlying and ever constant idea that we are failing, right? So only people from my generation are going to know what this is, but this is one of my favorite movies of all time, starring Steve Martin. It's called The Jerk. It starts off with Steve Martin, who's a very, very white guy, opens the movie by saying, I was born a poor Black child, and ends with him destitute, leaving his mansion. And as he's leaving the mansion, am I saying this that everybody already knows? The spoiler alerts. He sees a lamp on the table. He says, I just need this lamp. So he grabs the lamp, and I just need this thermos, and I just need this chair. I just need this, on and on he goes as he's dragging himself out of his mansion that he's being evicted from. I just need this. He's doing something that we all do. And this is another kind of cognitive bias. This is called effective forecasting. And effective forecasting is fascinating to me because people are actually using this as a sort of motivation, and it's actually a kind of poison. So what is effective forecasting? Effective forecasting, which I abbreviated to AF and will read every single time in my head as fuck. Effective forecasting is a shortcut that our brains take to predict a future emotional state, specifically our happiness, safety, okay, without doing the work of thinking forward in time, which is very hard for our brains to do. Like, our brains are really good about thinking about the past, really good about thinking about right now, really bad about thinking about the future because it's hard. There's a lot of moving parts to the future. So we get these dumb sort of benchmarks. You'll hear this when people say, I just need to get this raise. I just need to get this job. We just need to get married. I just need to buy the house. Someday when I get my shit together, right? Like that kind of a thing is where we're setting out these benchmarks for ourselves in the future that we are pinning or attaching our safety, our okayness, our happiness to. And that sounds like it's an okay thing. Like that sounds like goal setting, but it's not. It's actually, there's a deep, deep, deep trauma built into this. This is a learned habit, not a personality defect. And it hides a lie. So we don't really finish the sentence. I just need this lamp and then I'll be happy and safe, right? We don't finish that sentence. And if we did, we would begin to hear the lie. I just need to get this raise and then I'll be okay. I just need to drink this coffee and the rest of my day will be fine, right? I just need to make it to the weekend. I just make it to the goddamn weekend, right? And then I'll be okay. So what happens is we reach a couple of these benchmarks. So I bought the car and we had the baby and I got the job and I'm not happy, right? I did the things I thought I was supposed to do and I'm not happy. And that translates to, once again, a sense of failure. Like, what's wrong with me? So I have XYZ. I did those things and I'm not happy. What's wrong with me? And you can hear that as people are talking. I thought I was doing the right thing. Like people of I'm Gen Xers, right? So people of my generation and the generation of boomers are like, I thought I was supposed to get married. But I got married and we bought the house and we had the family and nobody's happy. What's wrong with me? I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. So this is what effective forecasting does. And as you listen, I can guarantee you in the next 24 hours, if you're listening for effective forecasting, you will hear somebody do this. I just need to blankety blank. When I'm teaching this with clients, the counteract to effective forecasting is to get real weird with it. And that sounds very silly and it sounds like it's not going to work. So let's say somebody says to me, I just really need to get this raise. The counteract would be to finish that sentence with something weird, bizarre. I just need to get this raise. And then they would finish it with, and then the rest of my life is going to be so freaking perfect. You can't even imagine, right? So when we take that ending of the sentence and make it as bizarre and silly and extreme as possible, our brains begin to recognize that this is nonsense, right? So I just need to get this contract and then my business will be fine for the rest of my life. And I won't ever need, I'll also lose 50 pounds, right? So we begin to sort of heighten that the dissonance between what our brains are telling us naturally and we're sort of poking fun at the goal that it's setting. So I want to pause here because we're kind of at the end of this string of things that are kind of barricades. What questions do you guys have about, an effective forecasting feeds shame? Because of course it does. So what questions do you guys have about plan continuation bias, action bias, or effective forecasting?
So effective forecasting, is that, so you immediately, I guess my question is, when you have a client engage in that, how much pushback do you get in terms of them not wanting to go like extremely kind of silly with it?
How much pushback did they give me when I say get silly and they're like, that's not going to work? All the time, every single time, every single one of them says, that's really, I'll get the deer in the headlights look. I'm like, I think it was in September where we talked about silliness, like the leveraging silliness actually does some wonderful things to our brains. So if I've already talked to my client about that, about doing like a silly option inventory, they get it. If not, we need to talk about why being ridiculous actually opens up parts of our brains. It moves our thinking from the back to the front. So if I get that pushback or like why am I paying you money for this, woman, right? Then we stop and we slow down. We talk about silliness and I'll basically just say what I said to you guys is that we are slowing down that thought in your brain. I just need to, and our brains just believe it. I just need to, I don't know, buy a house. That's a big one. I just need to buy a house and then because our brains are telling us, and then I'll be safe, right? But that's not. Yeah.
So it's like a soothing momentary kind of solution for the brain. Oh, perfect. Okay, I'll calm down.
That's exactly right. So our brains are, and we haven't talked about the triangle, I think, in any of these classes, but like you take a brain that is under stress and under crisis and you give it any opportunity for relief, however small, that stressed out brain will absolutely take that, whether it's procrastination, whether it's something like effective forecasting. A stressed out brain is seeking relief and will take it. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not a willpower thing. It's not a being a good person thing. It's stressed out brains, right? And stressed out brain can be all sorts of things. It could be momentary, it could be chronic, but yeah, effective forecasting is deliciously easy for our brains to do. I just need to blank. That sounds 100% like I'm setting a goal, right? But well, not if we're attaching our happiness to it. Back to Brandon's question, one of the other things that I'll do is like, I will prove to you that that's not what happiness or safety or okay looks like. And I'm going to do it with you guys right now. So I want you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. I want you to go back in time, go back 30 minutes, 6 years, 10 years, doesn't matter. Go back in time and think about the last time in your life that you felt purely happy, so safe and so happy that you could have lived the rest of your life in that moment. And I'm not going to ask anybody to share that, but typically that moment is incredibly small, right? It isn't buying a house. I had one guy say that it was pushing his 2-year-old on the swing, right? It's always, almost always, it's an incredibly fragile, quick moment where we were purely and beautifully happy. That you think about that. That's where you go when you think about your happy place. That is proof that effective forecasting is not how we get to our happiness. If your happiness is that beautiful little moment, why are we telling ourselves that our happiness and okayness is tied to these big dumb benchmarks? So I'm not saying we shouldn't buy houses and get raises and have babies, right? What I'm saying is we need to not tie our happiness, our okayness, our safety to that. So excellent question about effective forecasting. Any other thoughts or observations?
I was just thinking about effective forecasting and how deep-seated it can be. I'm the youngest daughter, or I'm the youngest, kid in my family. And so I think about all the times growing up that my parents would put so much weight on me of like, we need you to do this because you're our last chance to be able to do it. So thinking of that weight
I'm so sorry.
it's really funny when you think back about it. And like my parents telling me like, we need you to go to, or my mom specifically, we need you to go to college so that, you can get your degree and you can be the big earner in our family because you'll be the one that we'll live with when we retire.
Yep.
And thinking about like the families that we work with, a lot of them are first generation here or first person in their family to go to college. And so all of that weight that gets put on you, like your whole life growing up is essentially like this constant wave of that. Yeah.
We could talk about this offline sometime, but what you're talking about right there, and this is really gross, it's called financial incest, right? And we don't have time, but it's also called financial enmeshment. That kind of pressure on a freaking child, right? That takes a lot of different forms, but that's one of them. So that is trauma, right? Hooray. You got one for your trauma bingo card. Yeah, that tracks, right? And let's not bag on the parents too much because they're using the tools that they've been given, right? They didn't have any other tools and they're thinking about their own survival as well. But that doesn't make the impact on you any less. Okay. Go ahead,
could
Shay.
I I was just
please.
thinking, and then when Brandon was mentioning about when talking to participants and working with them, also like I work with career coaches and they have to be very careful not to be telling clients what to do. And they have to really listen and just go with what they are wanting and needing and they're capable to. So I was just thinking like, I guess throughout the class or this space, I would like to maybe hear, or even from other folks, like examples of how to like do this without telling them what to do.
What do you know? That's what the class is about.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Because I was just like, it's so many thoughts in my head, and I'm like, thank you.
I did not pay Cheyenne to set that up for me, but let's do this. We're at about halfway through because we're going till 11:30 or 2:30, whatever time you are. So let's take a 3-minute break. And we'll come right back and we'll start talking about what Cheyenne just teed up for me so beautifully. So you're back. Oopsie. As you come back in, give me like a thumbs up or a middle finger or a hello to let me know that you're back. Thanks, Robert. High five. We don't have a middle finger icon? Thank you, Chloe. Okay. All righty, let's keep going. All right, so here's kind of Cheyenne's question, almost. Okay, so that's cool, Hannah. Thank you for all the obstacles and the bad stuff. Cool, that's great. How do we actually help people that we serve create good systems? Because experimentation is all about system building. Thank you, Cheyenne. We're going to use a couple of tools, and one of these is called naturalistic observation. Those of you who've been through a Train the Trainer class or have been in session with me separately will know this pretty much immediately. So come with me out into nature. We're out in the jungle, right? We're out in the jungle wilderness, and there's a scientist there. And the scientist is observing a wild animal. So would this scientist be trying to change the wild animal's behavior? Chloe's shaking her head. No, Cheyenne's shaking. Why is that? Why not?
You're just there to
Because,
observe,
yeah,
see what's going on.
Yeah. Scientist's job is just to observe, not to try to change the wild animal's behavior, right? The scientist does not try to change the wild animal's behavior. Let's say the scientist notices that the wild animal has changed its own behavior. Would the scientist try to change the wild animal's behavior back to whatever they thought was normal? Why is that?
I would
Go ahead.
try to observe if something else intervened and to see if that something else changed again, if that, yeah.
Yep. So the scientist is going to bring in some curiosity there, right? Like, oh, that's weird. I wonder what's going on with that. Or maybe the scientist's observation of what that animal's baseline or normal was inaccurate to begin with. So let's say the scientist observes that the wild animal has eaten a large quantity of something disgusting. In their notebook, would the scientist write down, oh my God, that is the stupidest, grossest, dumbest animal. I can't fucking believe how gross and stupid that animal is. Is that what the scientist would write down in their notebook?
No.
What would the scientist actually write down?
More like the description, visual, I don't know.
Animal ate a large quantity of elephant poop. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
What seems
is
to be something purple. Yeah.
Exactly. So the scientist does not judge, right? So the scientist is not there to judge or shame or make value judgments on the animal. The scientist is simply there to observe and take notes. That's it. So the reason that we're talking about wild animal and scientist is because I want you to do this for yourself. I want you to practice this skill for yourself first, and then I want you to teach it to those that you serve. Is that I want you and them and all of us, I want you to be both. So I want you to observe your own behavior from a slightly distanced perspective, but also keep doing your wild animal thing, man. So just observe your behavior as if you are observing it from a neutral outside perspective. By doing that, just read the slides, Hannah. So this is why it needs to be an hour and a half class instead of a 6-hour class, because I'll go off the slides and just start talking. Being able to observe your own behavior without judgment means that you get some grace, right? It is the exact same as acceptance. Without acceptance, we do not get change. Cannot get change by forcing yourself or by them forcing themselves, by shaming, by doing any of that. If you could, we would all be perfectly fine right now, and we're not. Being able to observe your own behavior without judgment is the only way to get from where you are to where you want to be. And I'm being super, super repetitive with like observing your own behavior without judgment, because like I said, we're all perfectly capable right now of observing our own behavior with a bunch of judgment. So, but her observing your own behavior without judgment takes a little bit of time. This practice right here can take some skill. So be patient. What happens when we begin to observe? So we do three things. So the scientist is first going to just observe, right? Just going to observe and take notes. And then the scientist begins to notice patterns. And that pattern recognition is something you are already fantastic at because you're a human being. Our brains are great at pattern recognition. And then we can do, after we observe patterns, we can do what we're talking about today, which is experiment, build systems, and that kind of a thing, always from this core philosophy of observing without judgment. We are observing the processes, not judging the person. So that's one thing that we need. That's one tool. Naturalistic observation is one tool. The next one that we need is the controllable obstacle. The controllable obstacle is, as far as I know, of my own invention. Much of the stuff that we've talked about today has not been, like effective forecasting is not of Hannah's invention. The controllable obstacle is a three-part question. It is, what is it within you? That's part one, within you, that you have control over that is standing in your way the most. And I'm going to slow this down because this could end up like someone could hear this and translate it in their brains as a kind of judgment. I'm just a piece of shit, right? That is not kind of where we're going with this. As we go through the class today, you'll kind of see, but we're looking for these three things, something that is within them that they have control over, that is standing in their way the most. And the reason I have that middle one in there is because there are things within us that we do not have control over, like a physical illness or injury. We don't have control over, like you can't just repair a broken leg. I have anxiety, right? I don't have control over having anxiety. I have control over my reactions to that, but deeply and fine tuning, understanding what are the things within us that we have control over. So this is just put this in your pocket for right now, and we'll come back to this controllable obstacle when we kind of put it when we put it to use here in a minute. Gentle repetition. Gentle, this is not an interrogation, so gentle repetition. Very, very, very often I will ask a question and my client will answer another question, and then I will bring it back again, and that's okay, because the person that you're talking to is not listening to you. And that's not because they're a bad person, especially if they're in a crisis state or even a mild crisis state. They are listening to their own mental language, and your gentle repetition helps to kind of break through that a little bit. Yes, Cheyenne.
I just wanted to share briefly how that is so true. When you're under terror, like a lot of stress, your brain really doesn't function in a lot of areas. And I wanted to share how I experienced that with actually a therapist, where I was having the initiative, like an anxiety attack, and they made me read, and I couldn't read. Yeah. I literally could not read. Yep. And it was I to the point where I started laughing because I couldn't. And it's I've seen this happen to other participants, and it just it's impacting Tim. Yeah.
Thank you. It doesn't take much stress, crisis, trauma, right? It doesn't take very much for our brains to revert back to that back part of our brains and just go strictly into survival mode. It doesn't take much. So even if you feel like you're having just a normal conversation with someone and they're not picking up what you're putting down, that's not that they're disregarding you. That's a good, pretty solid crisis indicator, right? So gentle repetition. I was trained as a 911 call taker. One of the things that they teach you is something called repetitive persistence. When someone's in that crisis state, they have called 911 because their baby's not breathing. You are going to say exactly the same thing in exactly the same way over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where like anybody listening to that gets frustrated and creeped out, and it's awful. But to the person that you're talking to, they did not hear you the first 12 times. So gently repeating your question, or if you're reframing your question, just gentle repetition. If you look back through just our conversation today, I have repeated myself on a couple of things multiple times because I'm trying to brainwash you. The person you're talking to is not listening to you. they're listening to their own mental chatter. That's not a reflection on them as a person or you. That is just what our brains do when we get locked down into that stress or crisis mode. And again, it doesn't have to be that their house is on fire. It could just be just normal walking around stress too. So, all right, the other thing we're going to use is something called iterative development. And this comes from the world of software development. So we're stealing from a bunch of different places. We're stealing from the military. We're stealing from software development. Iterative development is a system building philosophy. Basically, you're going to build the mechanism for evolving a system into the system, because systems have to change. We're going to play the worst case scenario game for prevention. We're going to do postmortem for recovery. And again, we are evaluating the system, strategy, or plan, not whether or not they did it right. So we're going to take these three. Oh, I'm repeating myself here. Evaluate the system, not the person. Building, iterating, and evolving an adaptive strategy takes self-acceptance, experimentation, intentionality, and perspective. So let's talk about kind of a 5-step process. Okay. Awareness without judgment, gentle repetition, and finding a controllable obstacle, and being able to build a system that evolves itself. All right, let's actually put this into a kind of a process. So the first thing is that you're, and again, this is meant to be conversational, but not a script. So I'm going to give you a couple different options for like how to talk about this particular section of the cycle, but you can change it like with what your language looks like. So what's the plan, right? And if they don't come to you with a plan, you could ask, you could prompt them, what's next for you? If I asked what's next for you, you'd probably say like today or like for all time. And I'm like, and my response would be whatever. So if you prompt what's next for you, they're probably going to tell you a plan. Well, I need to go to the grocery store. That's a plan. Or, well, next week, I want to make sure that I'm on time for every single one of my shift. That's a plan. Or next week, I'm going to finish my dissertation. Or next month, I have to get my dissertation finished by January 1st. That's a plan. So when you say what's next for you, it's a lovely open-ended question that could go all sorts of different directions. You're probably going to get back a plan, a goal. And this is something Cheyenne was talking about, like they tell you their plan. You don't tell them their plan, right? They tell you. And it could be totally unrelated to whatever you're sitting in your chair today to talk to them about. It doesn't matter because everything is connected in our lives. So if they say, I'm going to be on time for every single one of my shifts, that's a financial decision. So that counts as my world, right? So everything is connected with them. So let them tell you the plan, because the purpose of that cycle that I just showed you, the purpose of this is not the end goal of whatever this thing is, going grocery shopping. It's teaching them how to build a system. So you're teaching it by practicing on going grocery shopping or whatever. Okay, that sounds like a great plan, or hypothesis, whichever kind of language you want to use. So if I say to you, you ask me, hey, Hannah, what's up with you for the rest of the day? I'm going to walk down to the food trucks and get myself some lunch. And you would say to me, oh, that sounds like a great plan. Your acceptance of their plans, that they have ownership over the process, right? You are not going to try to pivot their plan for them. Hannah, can you really afford that? Really? Is it raining? You don't want to go walking in the rain. It's not raining. It's not raining at this second. So your unconditional acceptance of their plan helps them take ownership over the process. And again, we are not really concerned about whether they're going grocery shopping or keeping up with their side work or whatever. We're concerned about teaching them a system. Yeah. Sometimes you'll get asked this, what do you think I should do? No. That's a trap. Don't answer that, right? Well, my answer to this is like, well, what are your options? So continuing to open up choice for them, constantly leaving opportunities for choice. Because like if let's say you're a jobs counselor, your job is to help people find jobs, right? And they say, what do you think I should do? You're going to come up with a fantastic list of 12,000 jobs they should be following up. And did you call Sadie back from such and such a place, right? That is removing choice from them. And if the more you do that, the more you reduce their autonomy, which makes it so that they are vastly more dependent upon us than they need to be. Cheyenne, did you go ahead?
Well, I was just going to add, which is really hard to do sometimes, because sometimes you just want to give them options, you know, like, yes,
Yeah.
let me give you some choices, but it's true.
So I didn't build this in, and this should have been a slide probably, now that I think about it. Thank you, Cheyenne. There's something that we do as helper outers called the writing reflex. And this comes from motivational interviewing, and is that instinct to jump in and fix, right? And I appreciate the instinct, and it comes from a really, really beautiful place, but it hurts them, right? It removes their choice from them. It makes them less self-sufficient, right? Because we're making a choice for them. But all we see is like, that's all you do all day long, right? Is you help people, for example, find jobs. So you have a skill set and you know what you're doing, but you are not helping that person develop or build a system or even take ownership. So yeah, I appreciate that it's hard, but the writing reflex is a very, very real thing. Okay, so what's the plan? You've got your plan. I'm going to walk down after this class. I'm going to walk down and get myself some lunch at the food carts. All right. So, by the way, practicing on small stuff like walking to the food carts is a fine thing to practice on. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but could also be a big thing. So your question next to them, your question to me would be, okay, cool, Hannah, what could prevent that from happening? Like, my shoes could still be wet from last night. What else could prevent that from happening? I just don't feel like it. So we're doing something called a pre-mortem. So we're kind of looking for worst case scenarios in an effort to prevent them from happening. And so asking this question, this one, what could prevent that from happening? This question is so incredibly valuable and changes. So if it's a good thing, if it's something that they want, what could prevent that from happening? If it's a bad thing, we actually change it a little bit, and you could say, how could you prevent that from happening? Let's say, okay, let's choose a different scenario. I'm going to, okay, we talked about one of your scenarios earlier was, I'm going to go to the grocery store and only spend $200. You say, what could prevent that from happening? Oh, I see some things that were more expensive. How could you prevent that from happening? Well, so you could use this question in a couple different ways, and basically just keep asking this question over and over again in different ways. What could prevent that from happening? How could you prevent that from happening? That kind of thing over and again. With that gentle repetition, they will not know you are repeating yourself. You're just having a lovely conversation, right? So what we're looking for is to kind of dig down deeply into the things that they actually have control over in that situation. Here's another, the way that I'm laying these out doesn't mean they need to be asked in this order. These are just a list of prompts. What's the silliest thing that could prevent that from happening? And here we're leveraging nonsense again, because people will stop in their tracks and go do this face. I don't know. You've just moved their thinking from that survival part of their brains up here. It's going to go right back again, right? But what's the silliest thing that could prevent that from happening is a fantastic question to kind of throw them off just a tiny little bit and get them thinking a little bit. This is where creativity lives. This is where, like, thinking around corners. This is the silliest thing is a fantastic way to teach someone how to pivot their thinking. And we're after that controllable obstacle. So what we're after, whether or not you teach them or even ask them this question, this is what you are after. You're after the thing that they have control over that is like within them, that is standing in their way. So whether you ask this question directly or you are just satisfying this question in your brain as you're talking, that's what we want. So let's say I'm going to go walk to my food carts, right? Your question to me. So I say, I'm going to go after the class, I'm going to go walk to the food carts. What would your question to me be? Oh, I'm just going to drink coffee till someone talks.
What's the silliest thing that could prevent that from happening?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. What is the silliest thing there? There could be a clown parade on commercial. And I don't want to be any part of that.
And if a clown parade happens, like, how can you prevent that from happening? Or is it the same question though?
Oh, I would, you know what? I would ask, what else? What
What
else?
else?
What are
Okay.
so the silliness kind of breaks them open, kind of cracks them open. Like, what are some other things that could prevent that from happening? Right. Because now their
Okay.
brains are, they're in a different mindset. You don't have to default to silliness, but it's always a good tool. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what else could prevent that from happening? Well, my shoes could still be wet. Oh, how could you prevent that from happening? Well, that's not a great, do you have other shoes? No, not this. My little example got too far. I just want to go to the food carts today at some point. So yeah, you can get them going pretty deep. This could be 2 layers deep. It could be 12 layers deep. It does not matter. Just keep asking, like, how could you prevent that from happening? What would you do if that did happen? What's the worst that could happen? All of these sort of, and by the way, this is what anxiety already does to our brains. We're just leveraging it. We're actually weaponizing and making a tool out of anxiety, because I can almost guarantee you that everybody's brain is thinking about worst case scenarios. That's what the paralysis of crisis does to us. So be on the lookout for self-judgment language and or stuff that's not in their control. So I'm going to be on time for every single shift this week is a great one. And your question would be, what could prevent that from happening? Well, traffic could be really backed up. What could you do to prevent that from happening? From traffic being like nothing, not a damn thing. Okay, what part of that do you have control over? How could you prevent that from happening, right? Then basically what you're wanting to get to is that point at which they have control. So traffic being backed up is a big deal. What you're wanting to kind of lead them gently towards is building extra time in, right? But if you say, so build extra time into your schedule, they will not do that. I can almost guarantee you, not because they're rebelling, just because this wasn't theirs. But if you can lead them through this kind of question of like, what could you do to prevent the backup, the being late because of traffic being backed up? Oh, I could get up 5 minutes earlier. Oh, what part of that do you have control over? Is this making any sense at all? You can tell me now. Okay. Cheyenne?
It is. No, it is. It is. Yeah.
So what's frustrating about this sometimes is this is not a script, right? I can't tell you exactly what to say. I'm giving you kind of a scaffold, but you kind of have to, like, it's going to depend on the person. It's going to depend on you and your relationship with that person. So I know that's frustrating sometimes, but I don't have an exact script. You want an exact script, go with the stupid SMART goals. Sorry, Robert. Get a beef with, I do.
We do SMART goals in
I
Latino
know,
Network.
lots of places do SMART goals.
And they call it Smarty goals.
Because okay. Yeah, I know you still have to do them. Just don't expect them to work. I know it's part of the paperwork. So self-judgmental language, stuff out of your control. This example is what could prevent that from happening. I just get lazy, right? That's a self-judgment, right? That's a judgment call for that person. And you could reframe this. Do you mean running out of energy? I'm like, yeah, I could run out of energy. How could you prevent that from happening? Make sure I get a good night's sleep. Don't play in my phone all night long, right? That kind of thing. So drill down until you get a small enough task or plan that they have control over and isn't judgmental. And this might take 1 minute, it might take 10. Remember that we are building a system, and that means starting microscopically small, so small that you think it's not going to work. That's kind of the, this is dumb, Hannah. This is not going to work at that point. Starting small keeps the risks and stakes low, and therefore the potential for failure. So if my plan is to get up 5 minutes earlier and I don't do that, who actually cares? This is not a big deal. I try something else. And that's why we're talking about experimentation. High stakes situations do not foster growth or awareness. I'm sure that the people that you're working with, and actually Robert might be a good, like the population Robert works with incarcerated people. Like if having like a situation that means you're not free to move around the country anymore wasn't a big enough stake to foster growth and awareness, I don't know what is, right? So high stakes definitely don't help foster growth, awareness, or change. All right, so we got, what's the plan? What could prevent that from happening? And then what are you going to try? So from the what could prevent that from happening, we probably got a list, right? So we got a list of a couple things that they could try. Get a list going. Don't be afraid to get weird. Write down. Right? I could, and there's things that they could do. I could, I don't know, my brain's just shut down. Now I'm on the other side of coffee. The more they list, the more choice you are building into their system for them, with them. And here's where you get repetitive. What else? What else? What else? Okay. Until they just go, I don't know. And that's fine. Then you stop. If they've come up with more than one thing, ask which one they want to try first. So if they've come up with, let's go back to being on time for every one of my shifts. And they came up with, I could get up 5 minutes earlier. I could lay out my clothes. I could make sure my car has gas. Right? So they came up with 3 things. Asking them to do all 3 of those is not going to work, right? Because we are working on an experiment. So we need to test one thing at a time. And you can be totally clear with them that we are setting up an experiment. In fact, the more you use a language like this as an experiment, the more it removes the potential for shame and failure from them. So of those 3 things, which one would you like to try first? And they're like, I don't know, I think I'll try making sure I have gas in the car the night before. Cool. All right, so now we have a hypothesis. We have an experiment to try. But before they launch off into their experiment, you're going to get a hypothesis or prediction. And it sounds like this. So what do you think you'll notice as you begin? What do you think you'll notice this week as you make sure that you have gas in the car before the night before? And they're going to come up with something. They're going to say like, well, I don't have to think about it in the morning. What kind of patterns do you think you'll notice as you set your alarm for 5 minutes earlier? Do you think it will be easy or hard to get up 5 minutes earlier? By seeding in these predictions, you are teaching them like what their brains should be thinking. This is kind of metacognition. So we're thinking about thinking, right? So you're asking them to predict what they're going to notice. And by asking them for that prediction, we're probably more likely to have that happen because they're thinking about it. Soliciting predictions reinforces that we are evaluating the system, the attempt, the trial experiment, not themselves. So you could do this like multiple. I'll ask, I have an NPR thing, NPR, notice, pattern, and then just a resolution, right? What did you, your big overarching reflection, notice, pattern, reflection, that's it. So I'll ask, like any of you have been in a private session with me, at the end of our sessions, I kind of ask the same questions every single time. Nobody has ever said, Hannah, you asked us that same question at the end of our last session. Nobody ever. What do you think you'll notice? What kind of patterns do you think you'll notice? Easy or hard is another good one. And then, you know, a big reflection. What's been your biggest reflection as we've been talking today? Don't skip this step. It's really easy to skip past the predictions and the reflections, but they need it. You are reinforcing it right into their little brains. All right. What do you think you'll notice? That's our hypothesis or our predictions. And then we're going to debrief. So they're going to go do the thing. They're going to try to get up 5 minutes earlier or whatever. And then your job is to debrief. And this, again, comes from military strategy. Whether it was a good or a bad outcome, you always, always, always need to debrief. The problem with debrief is we typically do it when there was a bad outcome, a failure, a negative result. You need to always debrief. They do this with military scenario training. Scientists also do this. They may not publish everything, but they always look at the experiment at the end and go, look at that. What do you think caused that, right? So we're using this language from these 2 different worlds. Always debrief. So if you remember, if you wrote it down, use the prediction or hypothesis. So when we last talked, You said that you might notice that if you got up 5 minutes earlier, that your day might go a little bit smoother. Is that what you noticed? So just that question right there, what are we evaluating here? Are we evaluating that human being or evaluating the idea of getting up 5 minutes earlier? The system. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Shannon.
like the experiment, right? We're evaluating the experiment.
Mhm. Yep. We're looking for how did it go, not how did you do. Why is that important?
Because the how did you do is judgmental right away. And I was also just, I really liked all that debriefing for the brain is so important. Many years ago, I used to be a preschool teacher, and we would wrap up our days by debriefing because for the kids, that's actually how the brain wraps it up. And it just takes you to another level. So I'm very appreciative of this step. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah. Debrief is something we rarely build in, but it's important. So let's say it went well. So what caused that good outcome? Even if you already know the answer, ask. So let's say you ask me, okay, how did it go getting up 5 minutes earlier? Oh, it went really good. Oh, what caused that? Or how, why was it good? Get some more information. Oh, it really wasn't as hard as I thought it would be to just get up, to set the alarm 5 minutes earlier. If you had it again, what would you do differently? We typically leave off debriefing when things go well because we think that that was 100% success, but some of that could have just been dumb luck, not necessarily in this scenario, but in all sorts of different scenarios. If you had it again, what would you do differently? Maybe I would have tried getting up 7 minutes earlier just because 5 minutes worked so good. Okay. Here's another. These are not, you would not ask these in order necessarily. These are just offerings of prompts. How could you lose what you learned in other parts of your life? So you'll notice what we're getting out of this debrief is another plan, right? Is probably a deeper and probably more complex and involved plan. So we're asking them for another plan because we're going to start the cycle over again, right? So what would you do differently? How could you use this in another part of your life? And again, they're going to sit there and churn. Let them think. You're going to, especially something like that last one, how could you use what you learned from this little experiment in something else, some other part of your life? They're going to go, let them just chunk away at that. So let's say it did not go well. Tell me more about that. Just get them talking. They're going to come up. You're going to get all sorts of information that way. It sounds like you found something that didn't work. What could you do differently? So here again, we are evaluating the system. You found a little system that did not work. What could you do differently on your next attempt? What do you want to try next? What do you want to start, stop, or change? And here again, we are soliciting from them a plan. We're back to what's the plan, right? So I'm going to break this down much, much simpler. So what's the plan is soliciting a plan. Worst case scenario for prevention. Get a trial going, experiment, a trial, whatever you want to call it. We're getting a prediction or a hypothesis, and then we're debriefing. So as you're looking at this, see now you guys know all my secrets because I just told you everything I'm about to ask. But so as we've been talking through this, what's one thing that really has resonated with you?
I really like doing the worst case scenario and like asking what could prevent that could happen, like what could prevent that from happening. I call myself a worst case scenario person because I'm always jumping to that. Well, what if this? What if this? But then looking for the solutions to that, I think, is the piece that I miss. So
that's what anxiety does. Is it is constantly stewing us in that worst case scenario. And what we don't do is move past that. We don't use those worst case scenarios. Before you guys joined, Robin and I were talking about like my brain is always doing worst case scenarios. I was raised that way. I was trained that way in the Coast Guard. We're always like, what if the clown attack, right? Like, but what we don't do is we don't process that and systematize it, because it's a superpower. Like anxiety brains are fantastic. And you know what? The rest of the population should thank those of us with anxiety, because we're what's kept the population alive for millennia. You're welcome. Cheyenne.
Thank you, Hannah. We rarely get that recognition.
Keeping the species alive. All right, so we've covered a bunch. What's something that you need clarification on? So something I get asked kind of frequently when I'm working with other trainers, coaches, professionals is like, what's the level at which I tell them what I'm doing, right? How much do I disclose? Do I treat this like a conversation, or do I think the other thing where I like treat it as a lesson with consent built into the beginning of it? And again, I don't have a really good solid answer for this. Like you could do this over dinner with your spouse, but you could also do this as a class for the people that you serve. It's always okay to ask for consent. Always, always, always. Like especially if this is in a class environment. Yeah. This is how if I'm in conversation with a client or I'm teaching a class, I would say something like, so I'm thinking about a little strategy that might help us navigate through whatever. Would it be okay if I shared that with you? Building consent in and being intentional about that adds more choice to them. So my client has said something where I think we need to build a little system. I might introduce the system with this kind of consent. And then if they tell me to pack sand, we don't talk about it. It's fine, right? So that is I feel like this is not super satisfying because I am not telling you exactly what to say, because that's also counter to my philosophy as well, but it wouldn't be super helpful. So I've got two references here for plan continuation bias and iterative development. This will be recorded, so you're welcome to go Google those. Those are ultimately super Googleable. So we've got about 6 minutes left. Does anybody have a specific situation that you want to bring forward, like a plan that you or someone that you work with has brought to you that we want to workshop a little bit?
Nothing is simple. Everything would take too much conversation and time, I think.
Give me an example. What do you think?
Okay, an example is folks that we work with that we're doing rapid rehousing, meaning they're getting into a house for the first time in some time, and they get assistance for several months, up to 6 months. And then after that, we have created another 4 months of partial rent until it gets to the full amount. But not even that has worked really, because 6 months is not enough to, in some cases, learning a language, get used to the system. And I'm talking about like refugee folks with families.
Yeah.
Anyway, so those kind of things are kind of like it's different to navigate that type of, it's more than just, getting a job. And so it's complex. That's why I was like doubting and saying this.
No, that's fine, because that complex problem is built up with all the little ones in between, right? All the little ones. So that's what this kind of does, is we could start with any of those and break them down. So do you want to be that person for us? Like,
yeah.
Okay. So, I'm not going to do it properly because I'm not sure exactly what you're like. So what's the plan for December, Cheyenne?
The plan for December is for us to get, we're not going to be able to pay rent. because
Okay.
we are going to have enough to pay utilities and food.
Okay. So what are your options?
Right now, my options would be to get more assistance because my partner is still learning the language to try to get a job. So we still need for my partner to start contributing with money. So we need extra assistance.
Gotcha. What other options might you have out there?
Maybe a better paying job for me, something where I can make more money. Or this is actually a real case. Somebody said, how young can my kid work? And I'm like 16. And no, not yet.
They're 8. They're super, like, they got a lot of energy.
Well, and they were bilingual. So they could actually because that was one of the barriers, so yeah. And
Robert says in Canada, you can work at 13.
Oh.
So ship them up there. No, I'm teasing.
No.
Don't. Sorry. That's the last thing Canada wants is more Americans.
However, in this situation as well, sometimes even when the both partners, sorry that I'm changing the situation a little more, but both partners are making the real income. And if you do the breakdown of the money incoming, it would be enough. But they like we were talking at the beginning, they blow out their money, even if it's just a little bit,
Yeah. Then we could spend time talking about that.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a whole class on scarcity mindset. It's like why I can almost guarantee you that they're going to blow through their money. Like super consistently, right? So let's return back to the little scenario, and I'd like to pull in the other participants if you want. So our person here has come up with some options, some plans, right? What would you, we've got work on getting more assistance, getting a better job, or kids working. I mean, it's not, everything is on the table right now. So what would you ask this person next, or say to this person next?
I would ask which solution they wanted to focus on, or which of those options they thought would be the best to focus on.
Yeah, Jessica.
I don't know what to say. Sure.
That's okay. So let's go with Chloe's. Cheyenne person. Which one of those would you like to focus on? Pretty much exactly what Chloe said.
Yeah, to get assistance so we can get a little more time to maybe get a different plan or look for a job, but we need assistance first.
Okay, that sounds like a great plan. What's my next question, guys?
I put a really hard scenario though.
You didn't. It's actually, that's a fantastic one. So the next question would probably be something like, what could prevent that from happening? So what could prevent you from seeking out assistance? Notice I said seeking out, not getting, right? There's what this person has control over, what they don't. What could prevent you from seeking out that assistance? Or
I don't know where to go.
Okay. What else?
Can you tell me where to go?
Yeah, actually, let's do that here in a second. I kind of want to follow this a little bit with you, but I absolutely have some resources for you. So besides not knowing where to go, what else could prevent you from seeking out assistance this month?
Well, that you already gave me all the assistance that you told me you had, and I don't think I'll be eligible for anything else, but I don't have money for the rent and we're going to get an eviction notice.
Yeah, I can tell that you're concerned about that. And that's kind of, I'm not here just to like throw resources at you. I'm here to sort of help you process through this. And we can certainly stop here if that's okay, because you've come up with something. You said you don't know where to go. That would prevent you from seeking extra help. But let's talk about some extra resources in the community, right? So
Mhm.
I'm not pivoting off of this cycle, I'm restarting it. So if I then offer a list of resources, or not a list, like 3, right? If I keep it small, then I can restart the cycle at what's the plan, right? So I've jumped from what could prevent that from happening. I've jumped right back up to what's the plan again. So I'm digging down with this person down into something that they can do. And the desperation and the hurt that is coming along with this is expected, right? This is something I should and could say is like, it would be weird if you were not worried right now, right? Like,
Right.
what you're experiencing is a hard part in your life. And it's okay to be worried and scared about this. That's what I'm for. So we are over time, and I can continue talking literally forever about stuff like this. I'm not going to kick anybody off, but I do want to just call and be respectful of your time. So Cheyenne, did that speak
Yes,
to
no, it
anything?
actually, yes, it did, because it actually reminded me avenues of how to use these prompts actually in a organic way and reground